I'm Tim Malloy from Movie Maker magazine, and you're about to watch my interview with Alex Lee Moyer, director of the new documentary Alex's War about Alex Jones, who famously rose from an Austin, Texas cable access conspiracy theorist to the head of the multi-million-dollar InfoWars empire. A quick update: since we recorded this conversation on August 2nd, Alex Jones has been ordered to pay nearly $50 million to the parents of a 6-year-old little boy who was one of 20 children and 6 adults killed in the December 2012 Sandy Hook school shooting. Jones was found last October to have defamed the parents by claiming the entire thing was a hoax, though he now admits that it did of course happen. I talked with Alex Lee Moyer about why she found Alex Jones to be a compelling documentary subject and how she never wanted her documentary to be all about Sandy Hook. You can see Alex's War in theaters or on video on demand, and if you'd like, you can subscribe to our channel here. And now, here's Alex Lee Moyer, director of Alex's War. Alex Lee Moyer, welcome to Movie Maker. Congratulations on this film, Alex's War.
Thanks a lot.
Very difficult to get a movie made. You started this off with kind of a, I don't want to say a content warning, but sort of an advisory to viewers. Why did you do that, and what does it say?
I just wanted the audience to know that that the film itself it's self-aware, that we understand the climate in which we're releasing the film. But it's also, it's a little bit of it's a little bit of a security buffer for me. I knew that if I just was like, hey, just so you guys know, I'm going to be, making art over here. And if if you're not comfortable with that, then maybe you shouldn't be watching this movie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just saw it as like a really utilitarian way to free myself up to make the movie that I wanted to make instead of being paranoid the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've gotten some blowback from, I guess I would say, mainstream media outlets who feel that you didn't. Well, let me rephrase that. Have you gotten blowback from people who think that you haven't disclosed enough about Alex Jones, or think that you've taken his side too much?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I've gotten that much blowback. I haven't read every review, but if you were going to anticipate what the criticism was going to be, that's of course what you think it would be. I like the Variety review because I thought that was like a really astute sort of, liberal perspective. If there's going to be one on the film, like to me, I thought that was like really great. But it's not. It's a lot of people who are going to say, well, why isn't this in there? Or why isn't that in there? And I'm going to run into that with every documentary that I do, especially about complicated topics that people feel really passionately about. But I have to make a movie, and I have to make a movie that works, and I can't go down every rabbit hole of every, everything that Alex has ever said and done in his life to piss people off.
Yeah.
It just, 2 hours and 15 minutes is a lot of people's time to ask. And I just, at the end of the day, needed to make a film that flowed and made sense and had a vibe and had good continuity, and choose the most important milestones in his life, and tell the story.
As we're recording this right now, he's in court. He's about to take the stand in the next couple of days.
Mhm.
In one of the cases filed by one of the Sandy Hook parents who successfully sued him for defamation.
Right.
Um, Unless I'm mistaken, the documentary doesn't give the outcome of those cases, right? That he lost those cases by default.
Well, I just tried to set up the premise of the case because everything was ongoing. And the other thing is, this movie's been done since March. So no, it's been done. I'm sorry, my bad. It's been done since last October.
And not
So
when the ruling came in against him. It just seems like a big important thing to include in a documentary about Alex Jones.
well, but that's the thing is this story with him is constantly developing, and every single week there's a new development. So no matter at what point I release this film about Alex Jones, there's going to be a follow up, and I could add like a card at the end saying, and then here's how that all resolved. But then by the time it came out, there would just be a new card that I would have to add and have to add and have to add. So I left it very open ended to say, here's the premise of this ongoing situation, here's the basis of it, and kind of leave it open ended because it's it's such a massive ongoing thing that there's no way I could ever put a bow on it in my movie. And
Yeah,
the same thing goes for the January 6th thing. It's like I had to stop the movie. I had to stop the movie at some point. I can't just be editing forever, you know? And also, when you're editing a section of the film like that part of the film, I can't go back and re-edit the movie for every change that happens. As a documentary editor, I've seen documentaries just go down the toilet or get shelved because the directors are forever like, no, let's just wait a little longer and see what happens and wait a little longer. And it just turns into a quagmire.
I guess my concern is that with that approach, the film kind of accepts InfoWars' frame of the Sandy Hook parents' lawsuits, which is that people on the left, after Trump won, wanted to punish Alex Jones and were willing to do anything they could to get him. And so they went for this Sandy Hook approach. But in
Mhm.
fact, one of the cases that Alex Jones lost is largely built around something that he said about a parent in the summer of 2017 on Megyn Kelly's show, where he said, I'm just going to quote this to make sure that I get it correctly. He said that Neil Heslin, the father of slain student Jesse Lewis, uh, was lying about the circumstances of his son's tragic death for a nefarious and criminal purpose. Heslin actually testified today that he's been harassed online and in the street, gotten anonymous phone calls, and then his home and his car have been shot at, all because he spoke out about a 6-year-old being murdered. Um, that just doesn't align with the idea that the left conspired after the 2016 election to take down Alex Jones. Alex Jones said this after the election.
Right. Well, I wasn't making a movie about um, just this one part. And also, it's my right as an artist to make something that is, and you've seen the movie,
Yeah,
and you're
yeah,
an intelligent person, and you can still draw those conclusions, even if I don't outline all that information and tell you that in the film. I didn't want to make a movie that just spiraled out and became only about all of the ins and outs of the Sandy Hook trial. So I wanted to show people, I had one very specific mission, which was to say, hey, what does this person think that he's doing? What is this perspective, which is a perspective that you're not ever going to really get anywhere else. And yeah, it's sort of like an unusual choice, but you know, intelligent people can go and they can call bullshit on Alex. That's fine. I invite them
yeah,
to do that on this film.
yeah.
But I'm not gonna like be, you know, sabotaging my work and like trying to like hold myself morally accountable for the things that this other person has done.
Right. So
Yeah.
what's the objective of the movie? Is it, I mean, I'm not saying that by portraying a person who has done bad things, you are doing bad things. I don't believe that at all.
Oh, cool.
You're a documentarian. I mean, you can present anything you want to, however you want to. That's absolutely right. And people are allowed to then nitpick it or complain about it. And that's
Right.
the First Amendment, and that's great. Um, but I guess the points where people might think that the documentary is skewing towards Alex Jones are when it ends in this sort of kind of heroic note where he tries to talk down the January 6th mob,
Mhm.
tells them not to act violently instead of ending on, somewhere where it could have ended that would have been more negative. But that's, people could, like you said, people can pick it apart however they want to. That's their right. You're allowed to.
Yeah, and they can also go and make that movie and make that show. And in fact, CNN just a month before put out their version of of their Alex Jones take, and people do it all the time. I mean, uh, I just wanted to have something that felt a little more insightful and engage myself in the challenge of showing people what he's actually like and what he actually thinks.
Yeah. I I don't want to say I'm I'm not like an opponent of Alex Jones because I just don't think about him very much, to be totally honest. I think the Sandy Hook thing is awful.
Yeah, of
But I
course. So do
don't,
I.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
I
do I.
also, I honestly didn't know that much about all of his theories before watching your documentary. So it was informative that way. And I do feel like I kind of got a read on the guy. And I don't know if this was your intent or not, but by giving him free reign, you also kind of give him enough rope to expose himself in some
Yeah,
situations. Um,
absolutely.
I thought the part about him growing up watching televangelists and then kind of turning into a televangelist was really interesting.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you picked up on that because it's one of the more it's sort of like a little Easter egg in the film, and I didn't know that I didn't really ever discuss it. So when people notice details like that, I think it's really cool.
Do you like Alex Jones?
I like him personally. Yeah, I think he's it's hard to it's hard to spend that much time with somebody and work on a project and require so much of their time and cooperation without having an understanding. That understanding like didn't come overnight, and it wasn't something that I went into it. It certainly was not getting to know him was certainly not the incentive of me wanting to do the film. But I have a lot of really deep, innate uh, gratitude towards any subject in my films. Uh, I feel like I need to do what I can to be respectful of that relationship. And so I'm never going to make a film about somebody and then go and become their enemy. Like that's just it's just a value that I have as a documentary filmmaker that that those relationships matter to me. I wouldn't say that we're like, we're not like tight. We don't hang out. It's nothing like that. But I appreciate anybody who helps me achieve this work and who has the at least he allowed me to make what I think is a fair assessment of what he's like. So there are things in the film that he's not happy with, that he wishes were not in the film, and we came into an understanding that way, which I appreciate.
So is this like the Michael Jordan documentary where Michael Jordan got to say no to certain things or got sort of final approval on the overall?
He didn't, no, he didn't interfere at all.
Mm-hmm.
He's never asked me to change anything ever.
Mm-hmm.
There are things in the film that he could worsen situations for him in his life, and he's never asked me to change anything. The only complaint that he has is that he thinks he looks fat. That's all he ever says. He's just like, "Wow, I look so fat," and that's pretty much the extent of his deep criticism about the film.
What do you think of his contention that he's the most censored man, that InfoWars is constantly being censored and banned? Just watching the film, I started Googling, and for example, he had a documentary called Endgame. He got to that title before Avengers did, back in
Yeah,
2007.
right.
And there's a section about how Endgame was deplatformed and all this stuff. And I went and found it on Amazon immediately, but I
Yeah.
couldn't find it on his own website. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think we know that the man exaggerates, and if sometimes, I mean, he's yeah, I mean, there's going to be things that you can pick apart that he says, and it's sort of, I mean, that's why he's famous, is because he's, a lot of people think of him as he's not the most reliable narrator. Let's put it that way.
we probably like a lot of the same books. I kind of enjoy those unreliable narrator stories. And looking at the interface of people who you've talked to, you give a thanks to Amanda Milius, the guy who did your score, Eli, I forget his last name.
Kessler,
Yeah, he's married to one of the Red State podcasters.
Red Scare.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you, Red Scare podcasters. And I actually listened to that interview with him where they kind of took the same approach of just letting him talk. Um, so I feel like we're probably watching and listening to some of the same stuff. Um, I'm not like an Amanda. I don't really know Amanda Milius's work, but I heard her on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast and was interested in that. Are you kind of in a conservative world?
I don't know if the Red Scare girls would Well, I would say that I am in a, if there's like a Venn diagram of cultural movements right now, I'm in the intersection of the people who are non-prohibitive towards speech. So that puts me in alignment with some of the post-left type people. It puts me in alignment with some conservative people, but I don't really consider the work that I'm doing to be innately political. Obviously, I want to make films that are reflect what's going on right now. As a documentary filmmaker, I think it's important to focus on some of these more difficult subjects, and it just so happens that we live in like a really politicized time.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that I'm just a person who's holding up a mirror, and people can see what they want in it, but a lot of people are, like I said, I mean, politics pervades everything. So people are going to project onto me whatever they want, but I just try to find the things that I think are compelling and that really get to the heart of what's happening in our culture right now, and make films about them. And people are going to have strong feelings about that, and I accept that.
Yeah, I'm decidedly not conservative, but I'm very, very
Yeah.
pro First Amendment, and I don't think there's anything wrong with ideas coming out and talking through those ideas and challenging those ideas, which I think we agree on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why we're here having this conversation.
Did anyone fund this or support it in any way? I was going to start off by asking how much Peter Thiel paid you to make this documentary, but I didn't know if you would take it as a joke, as it's intended.
Oh, I mean, it's he doesn't have any money in this film. A lot of other people do. Obviously, Hollywood and filmmaking is becoming more decentralized, and there are a lot of people in different spaces that want to fund projects. Also, I've been wanting to make this film for years. This film was not the brainchild of anybody else but myself. I had the idea to make this film before I even finished making my last film, which cost about $60,000 to make.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to accuse me of being like some shill for like Silicon Valley supervillains, like you just don't know what you're talking about. I've worked my ass off to get here. So there's a lot of interesting people who have money in this film, but this film wasn't that expensive either. This film cost $1 million to make.
Yeah, that's kind of expensive. Um,
Yeah, but that's how much it costs to make movies when, especially when you're talking about like insuring a movie or like, or the PR challenges of putting a movie out there like this, nearly impossible. Nobody wants to touch this. So we have so much money just like basically spent on red tape and just making sure that we can even get this out there.
do you want to talk about who invest? Are there any investors who are trying to encourage particular ideology?
No, there's investors across the entire political spectrum, different ages, but also I'm under NDA. I'm not going to go on some podcast and out all the investors in my films. Like I'm trying to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any political agenda with the movie, or is it more of a just interesting look at a person you think is intriguing?
I just want to. I just here's another thing that we're not addressing, which is a lot of content gets made now and is forgotten almost immediately as soon as it's released.
Mhm.
So people should be happy that they have something to talk about, that they have something that gets their wheels turning, and that there's something in this film that's going to be useful to people 10 years from now. That's what I'm interested in. I'm not thinking about how I'm going to have adversarial interviews with people for the next like 2 months because they're mad that I made a movie about Alex Jones when every major legacy media outlet covers Alex Jones multiple times a week. I'm thinking about people having something to watch 10 years from now that gives them some insight about the time that we're living in right now.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's my agenda. That's it.
Mhm. One of the pitches in this movie is that it's going to be a fair look at Alex Jones. Can you talk about the ways that you think he's been treated unfairly?
I don't necessarily think that he's been treated unfairly. I think he's been mischaracterized sometimes, but I think when you make the life choices that he's made, that all is fair, basically. So, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. So, he decided that this is what he wanted to do, and this is the path that he wanted to take. So the consequences of his actions are entirely his fault. So that doesn't mean that I can't tell the difference between somebody who's got one idea about his motivations and this person has another idea. I'm going to know what the true motivation is because I took the time to look into it. Yeah. So mischaracterization and fair and unfair are not the same thing.
One thing I thought was really interesting is that you show a pattern of him claiming that all of these different tragedies were orchestrated by the government or by mysterious globalists or some forces. And it goes back to 9/11. It goes through several other, it goes back to Oklahoma City, maybe even further than that. And then it continues through to Sandy Hook. And what's interesting about Sandy Hook is that that's the one where people are kind of paying attention.
Right.
Before they don't really, no one was paying attention on September 11, 2001, because there were a lot of other things going on. And no one was saying, oh my gosh, guess what Alex Jones said? Right. He was the one isolated person saying this horrible thing, which is where he kind of got caught. Does he kind of feel like the dog who caught the car? Like he didn't ever think he would have this kind of audience. He didn't think he would ever have this influence.
That's really interesting, Tim. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't thought about that before, but that's definitely an interesting observation. And yeah, I don't think that he knew that he just stepped into an abyss. No, but what's interesting also about what happened was that he made those remarks. And I remember I can't tell if I feel like there was a little bit of a splash at the when he first made those remarks in 2012, but it really did sort of come back to haunt him later on when he had gained more massive notoriety because of his affiliation with Trump. That doesn't mean that the statements are less egregious or anything like that. It just means that you're absolutely right. It did. And I think it probably also had something to do with social media too, and the way that, the way that we were able to, political interests were able to use the internet. So yeah, it definitely came back to bite him in the ass. That's an understatement.
One thing, and I don't know if you want to touch this at all, but one of the things that came out in the trial is that he apparently his company was bringing in $50 million a year for several years. An incredible amount of money. And now he's filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. How do you reconcile those two things? I mean, he seems to have a tremendous amount of money, and it seems like he's
spending a lot of money, though. I mean,
there's people watching who are going, well, he's trying to hide his assets from the Sandy Hook parents so that he doesn't have to pay them.
Oh, I mean, I can't speak to all that. Like I said, I wanted to set up the premise of what he had done and what he had said, so that everybody could, and what he thought that he had done and he had said. I thought that was the most important imperative for me as somebody who was acknowledging what was going on. But in terms of how much money he makes versus how much he spends, I mean, I know that they have I don't know. I mean, I don't have that much money. I've never had that much money. I've also never been being sued by everybody in the entire world at the same time. I'm sure he spends a lot of money on a lot of stuff. I'm sure he takes in a lot of money, and I'm sure a lot of it goes out. But I mean, I'm like the wrong person to get those details from.
Do you think he believes his own stuff, or was it kind of fun for a while and then it just sort of kept going? Because I just imagine to actually believe that there's a globalist conspiracy. I mean, I'm just going to quote Endgame. I don't want to mischaracterize anybody. The materials for Endgame says that there's a world government once in place. They can exact their plan to end 80% of the population and help the select chosen few of the planet live forever with the aid of advanced technology. I think there's also some stuff about space travel in there and how they'll use their, resources to travel the galaxy. To believe that 80% of us are headed for the chopping block. And there's also a lot of stuff about, blood sucking and killing babies. Sounds tremendously stressful and unfun. Is he just having fun popping the stuff off, or does he really believe that?
I think that probably goes through seasons of commitment to it. Um, I can never actually like speak for him. That's the thing. So, I and that movie's like over 3 hours long, by the way. And so that's like 30 seconds from like a 3 hour long movie.
Oh, I
Um,
took that from the promotional materials for the movie.
yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
2 paragraphs. So
Uh,
I'm not pulling some random
no, I
thing.
mean well, it is all a bit of a downer, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
if the question is, do I believe that that's what is happening? No, I don't.
No.
I'm a lot more optimistic than that. But if you're asking me if it's a downer, yeah, it's a downer.
Oh, I'm asking if he really believes it. I mean, I think
Oh,
there's high
if he
profile
really
media
believes it,
people who don't believe what they say.
I think that he believes it, but I also think that the only that he has a lot of consistencies in sort of the basis for his whole deal, which is that there's a globalist conspiracy, but obviously he's seen himself be proven wrong many times too, and I think he has maybe a fluid understanding uh, of of what's meets the criteria for that belief system, if that makes sense. But who
Um,
knows what he thinks about in the privacy of his, when he's laying in bed at night. I don't know.
one thing that makes me a little crazy about people on the left and the right is they assume that the most extreme person on the other side is representative of everybody on that side. When in
True.
fact, if you talk to, I've talked to many liberals about gun control in the last 2 weeks, and none of them have actually wanted to take away guns, for example. That's just one example.
Right.
Do you think Alex Jones is actually important, or do you think that people, perhaps on the left, have seized on him as an example, as the typical conservative, as opposed to an outlier?
Oh, he's definitely not a typical conservative. I mean, there's many people on the so- so-called right, especially like just classic like neocon conservatives, like they don't want anything to do with him. And he didn't even consider himself to be necessarily right wing until probably the last, 15 years or so. I mean, he was always sort of libertarian left.
Yeah.
Um, Coming up, and he was against Bush, and he was sort of equally against whoever was in the White House until Trump came around. um, but yeah, I I don't know who he's representative of, because it's such an interesting cross section of people that are either fans of him or are interested in him at the very least, even if it's just from like a memetic standpoint.
Well, there must have been people in Texas when he opposed the Iraq war who are going, yeah, this is great. Finally, somebody standing up to George Bush, who are now horrified by everything he says.
Yeah, I mean, I think he marches to his own drum, uh, and it's he's got people that don't like him everywhere, and he's got people that like him in lots of strange places. So it's a bit of a mystery. There's not many people like him.
Um, what's next for you? What are you doing after this? I mean, which is not to take away from what you've already done and the number of years it took to finish this.
Yeah, I mean, probably I should just like take a vacation and turn my phone off after this for a little while. Drink lots of water. I I have some stuff brewing. I have some, I've got projects. I don't like to talk about like what I'm gonna do next per se, because I feel like it could change. A lot of people are approaching me from kind of different areas of, filmmaking, and uh, it's weird that it's a little bit, like I was just saying, it's different people from sort of different orientations who want to do some work with me. But I don't know, I'm inclined to maybe do something not as heavy next time for one movie, but we'll see. That could change. I could, rest up and then, get back in the spirit of rebellion again. We'll see.
What did you do before you were a filmmaker, and how did you become a filmmaker? The first one was a few years ago, right? 2018.
Well, I've been an editor for like a really long time. Since 2004 I started editing, but I was working on music videos and just sort of like art projects and things like that. And over time I stumbled into editing documentaries. I did a few movies with this guy Adam Bala. He kind of gave me my start in documentaries, and then I got to a point where I just got really just interested in the world in a way that I hadn't been before, in terms of cultural issues and some political issues, and I decided that I had all of the tools that I needed to start making my own films. And so I just started going out with a camera and making TFW NGF.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, of course, after our film, The New Radical, did go to Sundance in I guess, 2018 or 2017.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even remember. I think it was 2017. But so that was an important milestone, and that movie had a fairly controversial topic too.
Can you explain that for anybody who doesn't know?
That was a movie directed by Adam Balalo that was focused on the inventor of the 3D printed gun, Cody Wilson, and some other sort of internet rebel types. Of course, we had the last interview with Julian Assange ever in that movie.
Oh.
And there were appearances like we talk about Russ Ulbricht and the Silk Road and Edward Snowden. It was sort of like the climax of all that Obama era whistleblowing, cyberpunk activity that we had at that time. And so that did really introduce me to a lot of these themes that I've stayed interested in.
And I don't know what the abbreviation TFW NGF stands for. Is it no girlfriend?
Yeah, it's that feel when no girlfriend.
Okay, so that's kind of about quote unquote incels.
I didn't know it was about incels when I started making it, and then it sort of turned out that that's what it was about. I still am not really wild about that term.
Yeah, that's why I said quotes, because I've read it.
Yeah. I mean, it was supposed to really just be about sort of like 4chan culture and irony culture. I didn't really even know what it was about when I started making it. It definitely took on a life of its own, and it's great. I want people to take away from that movie whatever they'd like to.
Yeah, I think this is sort of true of Alex Jones too. When you have people who you perceive as your political adversaries who are sometimes saying atrocious things and other times saying just kidding, it's very hard to engage with them. And is it worth engaging at all, or do you just kind of hope they disappear? And I think it's a real difficult thing for anybody on the left who sees them as a political force.
Yeah, well, TFW NGF is not a political movie at all. I mean, it might as well be The Catcher in the Rye. It's sort of like a really old story. It's just now we project a lot of politics onto it, and there's not a lot of politics in that movie. It's more of the underpinning of like the themes and the associations that we have with everything that's going on at the time, and what is the composite profile for the enemy or something. But the whole point was to show you that not everybody who fits that composite is the enemy. Right. So the Alex Jones premise is a lot less forgiving than that one. It's not really easy to talk your way out of him as a subject. You just have to kind of say, yeah, I did this and I'm showing up and let's talk about it, and that's it.